Hey everyone, welcome back to the Slightly Dogmatic podcast, where we give our opinions, and there are opinions in our own, and we feel strongly about them. I am one of your co-hosts, Jamison, and I'm joined by my good friend over here,
Yep, it's Dan here.
and we're going to be talking about stuff. Originally, this was conceptualized as somewhere where we'd talk about specifically games and movies, and just generally our interests in media. But we're going to end up talking about whatever we want, I'm sure. But that's going to be the loose kind of structure that we frame everything around. So keep that in mind. But yeah, we're going to talk about some current events first. We had originally imagined this as talking about kind of a backlog of sorts, talking about things we had finally gotten to that we had meant to, whether it be movies or games or books or whatever it may be, manga, anime, whatever. And we finally got around to it and then talking about it. And that's going to be definitely a portion of it, but we're not going to be probably as focused on that all the time because stuff happens. We're going to want to talk about it as it happens. So yeah, we're going to start off here talking about like some recent events. Like we just had a Nintendo Direct the other day. That was a thing. I think it was the first one since 2019, right? That was the big deal, and they showed a lot of stuff. They revealed that we're getting another anime sword fighter in Smash because that's what we needed. I'm not a huge crazy in-depth Smash player. I play with my friends when it's around, but it's a little bit boring, I think. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is kind of cringy as far as anime games go. It's a lot. It's very fan servicey, and I don't know. It could be cool. Maybe they're doing something unique with it. We'll see when we actually get around to playing it. But the big thing I think that we wanted to talk about was that Eiji Aonuma came up, and famed producer of the Zelda series, and he gets up there. Everyone's anticipating some sort of Breath of the Wild 2 information, and he goes, "Hey, I know you wanted that, but we don't got anything for you. How about HD Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword instead?" And everyone kind of just collectively sighed and was like, "Okay, great, another old Zelda game, upscaled to HD, which people have been doing in emulators already, legal digital backups, I'm sure." And it's now $60 again, I'm sure. So, I don't know. How do you feel about this, Dan? It's Skyward Sword, kind of infamous in the Zelda series.
Was that confirmed to be $60?
I mean, it's the presumption. I'm pretty sure that. Actually, okay, let's see. Wind Waker HD was 60, and I'm pretty sure Twilight Princess HD was 62. I got them both. I got Wind Waker HD for free, I think, through like when they were shutting down Club Nintendo. I think I got it some way through that. And then I got Twilight Princess HD when it became like a Nintendo Hits thing, and I got it for $20. And I think that's a very reasonable value for a game that's, what was it, when it came out, like 2007? Like, and so at the time when I got it, it was like a 10-year-old game. That's reasonable, $20 for an HD remaster.
Yeah, I'm a little conflicted on this thing because I don't know. I feel like on one hand it's kind of scummy. I don't know if I would say scummy, but it is kind of weird to release an HD remaster of a game that's upscaled for $60.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I guess, I mean, this will probably sell millions of copies, I'm assuming, even if this is like considered one of the worst mainstream like Zelda games out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I guess it's easy for me to blame Nintendo, but at the same time, it's like, why are you people buying it?
Yeah.
So this is almost like partially the consumer's fault, which I hate saying. But
No, I mean,
you,
yeah, there's something to
you
that
know,
though. Like this is what Nintendo fans do. You're either the one who complains about it, and you're like justifiably. Like I think it's absolutely justifiable to say, yeah, why would I buy a game that I already own on an older console, that's only just now running at 1080p instead of 480p or whatever it was before, and with minimal changes to the game, nothing added, nothing improved upon. It's not like you're doing like a remake where you're improving like the control scheme or something and like making it more modern. It's like literally 1-to-1. Oh yeah, I mean you could maybe argue that motion controls might be better on, because like it was a very motion control dependent game. The biggest thing they're adding probably besides it being upscaled is that you can now play without using motion controls, which was kind of the whole gimmick.
Motion controls are never going to be good, so that's definitely an improvement.
Yeah, it's probably outside VR, right? I haven't played any motion control VR games, but that seems to me, from what I've seen, that's like the future of motion controls. I don't think that like old school Wii stuff is going to be acceptable for all that much longer, you know?
It's kind of stupid because I feel like Nintendo is, for the most part, backing off on like that motion control stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently, I actually learned that apparently the Switch version of Undertale has like a secret boss that none of the other versions have,
Mm-hmm.
and it's because that boss like implements like motion controls.
Oh,
I'm like, why? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like motion controls never add anything, so I'm kind of glad it's kind of being phased out as like a gimmick.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
Yeah.
and so I guess and we just had this conversation, I feel like, recently too. What was it, last year? Whenever it was like middle of the year, they announced the Mario 35th anniversary 3D All-Stars game, which had, you know, Mario 64, Sunshine, and Galaxy all in one pack. For some reason, not Galaxy 2. And it was a similar situation of just, okay, so you've done nothing to these games. They're literally just being emulated on the Switch. People found out very quickly, because I'm pretty sure it got leaked early, like a lot of Nintendo games could do these days. And people found out that it's literally just being emulated on the system. It hasn't been updated to run in any particularly better way on the Switch hardware. It's not taking advantage of it, even though it's significantly more powerful than, you know, the consoles that they were originally on, obviously, because it's newer. And they didn't make any improvements upon it. You know, the control, like there wasn't even an option to invert the camera originally. They had to update it to allow people to invert the camera for those poor people who need to play with inverted camera. It is kind of a racket Nintendo has, but I think it's also unique for Nintendo. Like, they have a total stranglehold on their backlog of releases that are, you know, in a lot of ways timeless, that people have a lot of nostalgia wrapped up around, and I guess it works. Like, that's the thing. Like, as much as, you know, we're gonna scoff at it, and we're probably not gonna buy it at full price, people are, apparently, because they keep doing it. They wouldn't keep doing it if, like, Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD didn't sell well. I mean, Wind Waker HD, I think, was striking. I think there might have been an argument to be made there. Like, to me, it seemed, and they made like a lot more like quality of life changes that seemed like, okay, this is like, I think it's best when they do these kinds of things, if it's not a full remake, at least like making adjustments. And when it seems to be approaching kind of the like platonic ideal of that game that they were pursuing originally when they were developing it, that I can kind of see as like a justification, because it's like, oh, okay, like this is what you were going for originally, and you're able to get closer to that these days. Like, you know, the boat being faster in Wind Waker, like those graphics really seeming to come into their own, like that's cell shaded style. Like, it's absolutely beautiful. It was a pleasure to play. It was my first time playing through originally. I'm like, okay, this justifies it. But yeah, with like Mario, it's like not even 60 frames per second. Like, that's something people can do on their PCs that are or laptops that are like way older. Like, why not?
Yeah, I think like I don't know, with the Mario stuff I'm a little more lenient, because I guess those games are really old. In like a 64, I don't know, I played that in like when I was like 5 or something like that.
Oh yeah, I never even played it, so yeah.
Oh yeah, I played that when I was like child, and I guess like I think I'm more lenient on if game is like a lot older and you're bringing it to a modern console. I mean, they should probably make it better, but I think it's a better situation than the Skyward Sword thing.
At least it was a 3-pack of games instead of
Yeah, that's true.
one game for 60. Like, yeah, it seems a little tone deaf. And it would have made sense too. Like, the logical thing to do would be that because they haven't released Wind Waker HD or Twilight Princess HD on the Switch yet, it's the 35th anniversary of Zelda this year too. I think that was like the occasion that they mentioned in the direct. Why not just do a similar 3-pack and just say, yeah, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword, all HD, all, you know, updated for Switch controls, whatever that may necessitate, and that's on Switch now, $60. I don't think anyone, like, I think people would still be like, oh, like, you know, you barely changed anything, you're just re-releasing old games. But I think it's a little bit easier pill to swallow. It's like when it's 3 games for 60, you're paying $20 each, okay, you know, more or less. Yeah, but looping back to what I was saying before too, that like Nintendo's able to do this because, yeah, it's Zelda. or it's Mario, like 3D Mario games. These are the games that everyone has like hold of as like the ideals for, you know, platformers for Mario and adventure games for Zelda. That's like the ideal that everything else gets compared to. Everything that has inspired, you know, so many other games on every other console. The only thing that I think even gets close to approaching that in terms of just pure brand power and pure like power behind that individual IP would be
Pokemon.
yeah, that's Nintendo too. Like Pokemon's like that,
Oh yeah.
and Nintendo has like a stranglehold on that too. They, you know, the Pokemon company like works basically only with Nintendo. I'm pretty sure. I don't think there's any other arrangement there. But I'm thinking Halo with Microsoft. That's the only thing that I think even gets kind of close to like scratching that itch in people's brain of nostalgia.
For me, I think it's Final Fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess it's a similar situation where so Final Fantasy X came out on the PS2 in like 2001.
Oh my god, yeah, I remember my grandpa buying it for me
Um,
randomly.
yeah, I'm gonna say I've bought that game like 6 times.
Oh my god.
So maybe I don't have any justification to talk, but I've bought it on the PS2, the PS3, the PS4, the Vita, and the PC.
Yeah, they are doing that too, huh? That actually that's a very apt comparison. Like I was thinking in
Yeah,
terms of um, like console manufacturers and like publishers, like, you know, those first party companies keeping a hold on it. But yeah, that's Square. Like Square's doing the exact same thing, and they're not beholden to any particular console, but
I think
they're doing the
it's
exact
they
same format.
know. I
Oh
think they
yeah,
know they can make money off of this so easily
Kingdom
because
Hearts is gonna be the same way now going
people
forward. I
like
guarantee
me.
it.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna buy all of those on PC. I don't care.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
I'm
Same.
enabling them, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like this kind of only works with like a certain type of game that appeals. I'm not saying like solely appeals, but there's like you said before, there's like a nostalgic component to it
Mm-hmm.
where like I bought this game because I played it when I was like a kid and I loved it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like strangely enough carried over into like my adult life.
Right.
It's kind of weird that Skyward Sword. I have a hard time believing people have that attachment to that particular game, but I
Mm-hmm.
guess that is just the series as a whole
I think
that
Skyward
they're
Sword is
thinking.
like the outer bounds of people having that attachment. I think that's like this is actually them really pushing it because it's the one, like, you know, I think it's probably the worst regarded Zelda game that's actually made by Nintendo. Like obviously the
It's probably
CDI
so
games
good.
aside. Yeah, the biggest complaints I've heard is that it doesn't feel organic. It feels like a set of like dungeons that are just kind of laid out in a way that like benefits gameplay, but there's not like a much world building around it. Um, I own the game. I bought the special edition when it came out originally on the Wii. I got the controller. I still have it. I still use it when I need a Wiimote. And I just never got through playing the game. It just, I don't know. For me, I actually might have a slightly stronger attachment to 2D Zeldas than I do the 3D ones. Maybe just as a result of how things panned out when I played them. But it's, I think this is going to kind of like decide whether or not they can continue doing this, and they're definitely going to. But like at least with Zelda, this is going to be like even I feel like maybe even the most idealistic Zelda fans are going to be like, okay, $60 for Skyward Sword. I don't know.
Yeah,
It'll be interesting.
I kind of felt the same way when like the PS4 came out initially.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Do you remember that when there was like that phase when like like every like PS3 game was just becoming remastered and then re-released on like PS4?
Yeah, yeah. You had like
And that
Bioshock and Last of Us
yeah,
and all those. Yeah.
that really fucking peeved me for a bit because and like my logic was they could have like used the funds to just make like a new like series, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then and I kind of realized I was like, I mean, these are like outside studios for the most part. For like, I think I was like kind of annoyed at like Dark Souls, I think.
Yeah.
And then I was
Like
like,
Scholar
I
of the
remember I
First
was,
Sin for Dark Souls 2? Or are you talking like
I
Dark
think it was
Souls
like,
Remastered?
yeah, I think I was thinking about the first one,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like complaining to my friend that they could have just used that money to make like a new Dark Souls, but then he was like, but like why? It's just like a separate studio, like
Mm-hmm.
who like they're still working on new games.
Mm-hmm.
So like I've kind of cared. I've learned to like kind of care less about
Yeah.
remasters coming out.
Yeah, and while we live under capitalism, while
Yeah,
it's obligatory, it's going to be something that happens inevitably just because there's inherent value there. And the thing is, first of all, like just remastering something and re-releasing it, basically upscaling it and making sure it runs with kind of a what you would expect for stability on modern consoles is probably a much is no undoubtedly a much cheaper process than ideating and developing a whole new game. And that's something
yeah.
that if they want to, like a lot of other companies outsource it. I don't know if Nintendo outsources it the same way. I won't make any definitive
They
statement
probably have
about
a small team who like
yeah,
has this.
they have so many like individual like studios that they get different assignments and stuff.
Like, they're not dedicating entire development teams to
No.
fucking remaster this game, you know?
Yeah, and so like as lazy as it seems, I think that's just like it's like an easy get, especially when there's a transition between generations, where you can kind of say like, okay, like it's going to be a little while until we've got this new game coming out that's like optimized. Like it would be like the same logic as like, and I'm kind of glad they didn't do this, but like let's say for God of War on the PS4, if like when the PS4 came out, they're like, okay, we got God of War, the new one coming out, the reboot, the whatever, the reimagining, God of War 2018, the masterpiece that we all know. But they're like, okay, well, it's going to be a couple years before that comes out, and it ended up being like 5 years. But we can scratch people's God of War itch and re-release 1 through 3, whatever HD collection, which they already did on PS3, but then let's say do it again, or
Yeah.
So it's just, I think, I'm sure from a disgusting corporate mindset, disgusting capitalist pig mindset, it makes sense. And I think it's just like kind of a reality. And it's like, yeah, we can choose to engage with that in what way we will. I just think that like Nintendo is so old school in so many ways. They're in a lot of ways they still feel like that original company that started making like playing cards back in like the late 1800s or something. Like they've been around for fucking ever, and it feels like a lot of their philosophies still have like their roots in that. And this kind of thing.
I almost like that though.
I think that that's the appeal for a lot of people. I think that like fuels a lot of the nostalgia around it, but it also fuels a lot of the contention they have with like modern technology and modern media, where Nintendo has a contentious relationship with like fan projects and like ROM hacks and stuff like that, which is kind of a gray area for copyright, but ultimately it's kind of like this is going to eat into sales of your own games. Like it's kind of a goofy thing to go after. It's IP protection. It's a slippery slope. The system's really stupid. Ultimately, it's all for the protection of corporate interests. So it's like, bleh. But the same thing with like content creators online. They have a contentious relationship with them. They've tried a couple different programs where they're like, oh, we'll make most of the money if you make Nintendo videos on YouTube, but we'll give you a little bit. We'll throw you a bone. When in reality, based on what we've seen, based on legal precedents, people who make content online with Nintendo stuff, it's first of all, it's fair use. Everyone loves to scream at fair use. But it's true. They're making their own content. They're not just, Nintendo kind of treats it like they're like a cancerous tumor on them, like sucking money out. And it's like, people who are watching YouTube videos on Nintendo games aren't people who are just going to say, oh, I've watched this on YouTube and I'm not going to buy them. I think that's a very difficult
Stupid. They weren't going to buy it in the first place.
Yeah. And so and what I'm getting at with this is this whole line of reasoning is that if they want it would be consistent with that kind of contentious relationship if they motivated people. I guess it works both ways. I guess it makes sense either way. But I would think that you want to motivate people not to just emulate things and pirate games or use legal digital backups, however you want to frame it. Give people a reason not to do that. Put something in the game that they can't get any other way. People aren't emulating Switch games effectively right now, as far as I can tell. So build the game for the Switch. Make it run really smoothly in 60 FPS because there's no reason that Mario 64, Sunshine and Galaxy shouldn't be able to do that on a modern console like the Switch. And then that way, that's how you motivate people to not just say like, oh, well, why would I do this? I can just emulate this on my PC in 60 FPS and play it with an Xbox controller. Like if that's what someone wants to do, you're making the choice really easy for them. So you would think that the IP is what makes it valuable, and then so just make it even more unique, and so that you can't get it anywhere else. And then you think that would be a better motivation. But maybe just with how cheap it is to just do it, and how much money that they know they're going to make based off of previous sales of other similar projects, they're just like, oh yeah, no, it's totally worth it. Like it's not worth the effort to do this. And I'm guessing that's what it comes down to. But I'm just thinking like philosophically when around this stuff, you would think that would be the inclination.
Yeah, I agree. No, at the same time, it's like I feel like people are getting like too angry about this, and I'm like, just don't buy it.
Yeah.
just skip it. There's a lot of games to play, and
Wait till
if
it
you
gets
don't
cheap.
want to play games, yeah, if you want to play games, there's a lot of books to read, a lot of movies.
Yeah.
Like, don't let this control your attention so much. Just don't buy it.
Yeah, patient gamers, whatever that subreddit is just, and I found it more and more. Like I've got such a backlog. I'll play those unless it's something really huge that I've been anticipating for a long time. Maybe I'll get that at release. But more often than not, like you don't like. I think most people who play video games, so like any kind of regularity, have a huge backlog of stuff they've been wanting to play that you could probably get for like $5. My friend Ananda, he got Persona 5 on PS3 recently. He got it like $5 and he played through it. And it's like, yeah, exactly. Like that was out for so long. Why not do that instead of like getting like the most recent game and spending $60 on it? There's enough stuff in the backlog. I just got I finished Cyberpunk recently. I got that at a discount at release, but now I'm gonna go back and play Deus Ex, Human Revolution, that I got for like $3 off of I got a code for $3 from a reputable retailer, not a gray market, and that's gonna occupy me for a significant amount of time too until whatever next new release gets cheap. So yeah, it's like dig into your backlog, which is kind of like the core of our interest. I think that something that is a logical next step here, as we're getting into this, is talking about like our nostalgia on Nintendo. Something that actually I think will hit home for both of us is the recent leak of Dinosaur Planet 64. That's something that I told you about. I don't know, you weren't super aware of it until I mentioned it last night when we were prepping for this, right?
Yeah, no, I played Star Fox when I was a kid, but I didn't know about like that Star Fox Adventure being what like that Dinosaur Planet game,
Yeah.
but that being like scrapped, kind of like how DMC and like Resident Evil
Right.
was like made
Yeah,
in
and
like
so
a similar vein.
yeah, and just to give some background, if whoever's listening doesn't know, there was a game on GameCube called Star Fox Adventure that has almost nothing to do with that franchise. Star Fox was like a starship shooter game. I don't even know what the genre is called, but it's like you're in a ship, and it's like an old school arcade game basically in 3D. First one was on Nintendo 64. The GameCube one had almost nothing to do with the original series. It just had some characters thrown in, and that was because it was kind of a last minute butchering of an original game that Rare was making. That Rare was the developer of Star Fox Adventure and the game that was prior to being associated with Star Fox, Dinosaur Planet. And they basically conceptualized and world built and developed the game originally on Nintendo 64. And late in the development period, apparently what my understanding is that Miyamoto, Nintendo's wonder child, kind of responsible for all of Nintendo's major successes, came up and was like, oh, this should be like a Star Fox game. And I guess there was maybe some pressure on the time to release a new Star Fox game, and that wasn't something that they necessarily wanted to prioritize, so they saw this other game in development that was like kind of related to Nintendo and was like, okay, here, let's you guys make this into a Star Fox game instead. So this game that was originally starring another protagonist became a Star Fox game. They replaced Fox. Essentially what happened was this group online, let me find their name, but basically they bought a disc of the Nintendo 64 build from like a Swedish game collector, and they released it to the public. And it's a late build on the 64 before they transitioned to developing for the GameCube. Fox McCloud was already in it as the main character, so they've already replaced their old protagonist, and it's just crazy to see. It's an insane part of history, because this game was almost done on the Nintendo 64 before it came out, before they switched to the GameCube. And it kind of seems to embody what the game originally was, the original vision for it. Essentially, it seems that for Star Fox Adventure, they really narrowed the scope of it. It seems like there was some serious rushing in the development near the end. And so they didn't really get to flesh out this world that they had seemingly spent a lot of time building, individual tribes of dinosaurs on these planets with their own cultures and lore and stuff. And originally, apparently, Crystal, which has apparently awakened a lot of furries back in the day.
I was about to say that. Yeah, I was like, I'm looking at the screenshots of Dinosaur Planet right now, and I was gonna say it looks like a furry's wet dream, which kind of look. Yeah, I mean that's what Crystal was.
Yeah, Exactly. It's like it was like Lola Bunny for a new generation or same generation. I don't know, somewhere around there. Um, and it originally Crystal was going to be like an equal protagonist to the original guy that they had, and you were going to switch between them. And then it became just Fox, and she kind of became a secondary character in her original game. But yeah, I think it's just really cool, and I think that we both have a personal connection to Star Fox Adventure, right? Like, what was you? I don't know. Like we were talking a
I
little bit about
I
the effect it had
yeah,
on us.
I actually started. I didn't play the like the NES or Super Nintendo one,
Me neither.
but I did play Star Fox 64,
Mm.
and I love that game.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got a GameCube, and then I played Adventure, and I'm gonna say that's like one of the first games that like it gave me like that sense of like that huge like open world kind
Mm-hmm.
of exploring like
Oh.
exploring new areas that it didn't feel like a kind of like a closed box.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Um, which I guess it is a closed box. It's not really open world, but it didn't at the time. It didn't feel like that to
I mean,
me.
it's open world by those standards. Like, I feel really
Yeah.
similarly. Like, GameCube and PS2 were my first consoles. My grandparents and my parents didn't coordinate, and they each got me one, much to my parents' chagrin. But Star Fox Adventure was one of my really early games, and yeah, like similarly, like this is the first Star Fox game that I played. This was, and even to this day, it's like my primary experience with the series, and it's no, absolutely that and Metroid Prime. I told you this last night, but it's like the first time that I played a game. Like previously, I'd played like Game Boy Advance games, and that's like a lot more bottled and limited, and I still had fun with it. But this and Metroid Prime, and to a lesser degree Mario Sunshine, were the first games that really gave this sense of just a boundaryless area, and just like kind of like this feeling of like infinite discovery. You couldn't see the boundaries of the game world in the same way that you could before. It seemed to me that like, and of course, like when we're kids too, like I don't know how common this experience is, but like when I was a kid, I never finished games. I played in like the early areas. I ran around and did stuff. I never knew like what I was supposed to be doing. I never paid attention to the story, and I just kind of did random stuff. But this and like Metroid Prime kind of fueled that in a really interesting way, and it was never tiring. I never kind of just got bored with it and gave up. It was always this, wow, what is this? Oh, I just like wandered down this random pathway, and now I'm in like a random dinosaur village that I've never seen before. Like, what the hell is this? And it let you go there, but before you had anything to do there, and uh, it it felt like genuine discovery. And I think as a short tangent, that's kind of like what Breath of the Wild hit on. It like kind of like reignited that kind of spark for people. I think that's the closest I felt to it. I think playing that, but yeah, no, does that kind of seem to represent what you were saying about what it meant for you?
Yeah. Like because like I guess I played earlier consoles than you did.
Mm-hmm.
So I I think my earliest memories I remember having like a Super Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
Um Even though I was probably born after it was like way into its life cycle. Like
Mm-hmm.
so I played like Mega Man X, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I think like Nintendo 64 and Super Nintendo games are more you could definitely feel the restrictions
Mm-hmm.
more than like PS2 or GameCube era games.
Definitely, it's where
I
it first
think
got.
that game really showed how, I guess, maybe if we went back and played it today, it would seem kind of small.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, I feel like it pushed like the boundaries. I think that era, like that generation of consoles, really opened up like what you could, how big like a game could generally go. And
Mm-hmm.
hot take, feel like I feel like the way games have done world building like today has really fucking regressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's like the benefit of I guess like a closed area that feels open,
Everything's more
where
purposeful, in a closed area.
yeah, the purposefulness, like everything. Okay, obviously, like this was like over a decade ago that we're talking about, but in Star Fox, everything felt like purposeful. Every NPC in there
Mm-hmm.
felt like they had a purpose for a mission or like or like a quest or something like that.
Mhm.
Which I don't really get the sense of. Maybe that's also because I'm a jaded adult now. But like, I feel like I don't know. A lot of games are like, yeah, man, you can go here and you can go here, but then they're just like open fields
Mhm.
with like one word of dialogue. I don't know. I've shit on Final Fantasy 15 so much, so I won't get into that. But that's how I that game encapsulates what I feel about like current open worlds, where it's just empty,
Mhm.
and the sense of wonder is like the most that will expand is, oh look, that looks really pretty, but there's
Yeah.
nothing to really do there.
It's there for like an initial sense of scale to trigger that
Yeah,
wonder for you, but then when you actually start to venture out into it, you start to realize that there's like very limited activity in it. And I think that's true for a lot of open world games. Like I think Assassin's Creed's guilty of that. I think that yeah, we've and I think this is not a new criticism. I think that that we're coming up with. I think that like that for a long time now, there's been a lot of critique of size for the sake of it in open world games, and it's kind of just like for the sake of pumping in content that doesn't have much meaning or significance. And I think what also contributes to it, to what contributed to the sense of wonder in Star Fox Adventure and in Metroid Prime, as I was saying, is also that there was a lot less hand holding in those games. And I don't think that that's like tutorialization is necessarily a bad thing in video games. I'm not one of those people who's like an elitist with gaming. It's like I have to figure the trial and error is a critical part of being a real gamer. But I do think that it kind of just letting you organically. I think just having being comfortable with maybe the person playing not immediately grasping every single concept and letting them kind of like wander around and figure stuff out slowly. I think that there's probably a
yeah.
correlation too with our reduced attention span. Though I also remember hearing a study that actually, in reality, that our attention spans haven't actually changed that much. It's just kind of being expressed differently. That's something we can maybe get into another time because I don't have everything in
I have
front of me.
opinions about that.
Yeah, I think that it's a widely held opinion that like we've lost attention span.
I could talk about this topic probably for like 2 hours if I wanted to. I've ranted so much about how I don't want to sound like a fucking boomer, like yelling at kids to get off my lawn, but I've talked so much about, I guess, like how media has changed in
Mm-hmm.
like gaming, film, like books, and how that's changed from like our generation and like Gen Z's to like 30 years ago. But we don't
Mm-hmm.
have to get into that today.
No, yeah, no. I think it's worthy of its own podcast topic as well. But I do remember seeing like there was a study that said like it's not as clean cut as you might think, and it would be my instinct to simplify it too, but there is something to be said for like letting people just kind of figure it out. It's the same story with me for like Metroid Zero Mission, which is like even 2D of just like they'll find it eventually. They play testing there's I guess it has to do with like maybe some sort of diminishing of like the art form for video games
I agree. No, I
at
agree.
a larger
I
scale.
mean,
Like indie games do this more. Like you think about like Journey, which I never finished, but like it's still like it hit a similar note of just like it's open and you just figure it out. You'll find your way eventually. And just it's a confidence in your game that like it's going to be interesting enough to keep people engaged with it. We insert just enough intrigue initially to keep people around so that they'll fumble a little bit maybe, but once they figure it out they'll be like, oh okay, this is really cool, and it gives a sense of accomplishment and like, okay, I figured this out myself. It wasn't just a text block coming up on the screen, pausing the game and saying, here is
yeah.
how you walk forward, here is how you turn the camera. And it's like, yeah, I think you got to give people credit and say like, yeah, most people, even if they don't play video games typically, they'll figure it out, and like there's something to be said for that. But I can imagine how that would not present well in a corporate space where you're having playtesters and it's like it took them on average 5.5 minutes to leave the first room. We really want to get that down to 3 minutes to maximize engagement with the following rooms. And
Yeah.
if you're trying to boil it down to a science like that, that's how I think we lose some of that. Art, like I don't want to sound pretentious either, but I do think like that wonder that you get from it.
Yeah, no, I see a lot of like parallels between, I'm gonna say, like movies and gaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where if you look at, for like film, if you look at the top 10, let's say like top 20 most highest grossing movies of the 2010s,
Mm-hmm.
um in the 2010s, 2020s, 2000s even, they're generally going to be franchises, like your typical Marvel, big name adaptations, Transformers, like sequels.
Or a remake of like some 80s movie,
Yeah, like
or
a remake.
yeah,
There's very little non-established,
like
I guess.
IP.
Yeah, that is in the top grossing list.
Yeah.
And if you kind of look at that same top like box office list in the 70s or 80s,
Hmm.
like you're gonna get a lot more original ideas. Granted, they might have been adapted from like a novel,
Hmm.
but they're generally not. Back then, like 30, 40 years ago, they were a lot of them were newer
It wasn't as cynical,
ideas.
right? Like it wasn't like, oh, this is like, we know that this has this much value. Like, there's some guarantee that we're gonna make this much money back because this already has this much um, like
Yeah,
the cultural
like
significance that we know that there's gonna be guaranteed this much interest in it.
yeah.
Like this there was, and I was just thinking too though that's absolutely the case with like movies and even video games now. But I also wonder that like maybe the movies now that are kind of original ideas that have more,
Now they're indies
artistic value.
though.
Yeah, but I wonder like how much, like it probably, actually no, it probably doesn't scale. I was thinking like with how much money they were spending on it back on movies back in the day, like because budgets weren't nearly as high. Maybe that like the movies that are original now, they're spending about as much money as you would have back then, and it's just that like the upper tier of movies, they've just that's gotten the ceiling for how much they'll spend on a movie has just rocketed up, but like a similar like like a movie for the scale of like like something like Citizen Kane or like Rear Window, those movies probably would require about as much budget as something like Minari, if you really think about it.
Yeah,
But maybe with like inflation, I bet you it actually would still be like significantly more money being spent on those, because also movie making has gotten a lot more efficient too. So it probably actually doesn't scale. It's just a thought I had, but no,
yeah.
I think that there's definitely something to it. And it sucks
Like
because it's been relegated now. Like art stuff is now indie, both in video games and in movies.
yeah, I feel like I don't know. I just feel like in gaming and in movies, um, I guess like things that you can argue or like art is a lot less in the public consciousness than it was like 40 years ago.
Hmm.
So okay, like there's a weird example because like Woody Allen,
Okay. Okay. Here
um,
we go.
not a super like his movies aren't really for the mainstream audience of today.
Hmm.
You know, no one in the mainstream really gives a shit about his movies today, right?
Yeah.
But he was like one of the most popular directors.
It's like Roman
You know,
Polanski too, right? Isn't Roman Polanski still making movies like in France or whatever? And like they still get
yeah,
shown at like film festivals, and he still gets
yeah.
standing ovations and stuff.
But
But
like I guess like my point more is like Woody Allen, he made this movie called like Blue Jasmine.
hmm.
Great movie. It came out I'm gonna say like the early 2010s, maybe late 2000s.
Hmm.
Like great movie, like regardless of like what you think of him as a person.
Hmm.
Like like I'd be surprised if that movie was even in like the top 70 of that list, like the box office of that year.
Yeah.
But he like back when he was like in his prime in like 70s, 80s, like everyone kind of knew what his movies like were like when they were coming out.
Hmm.
I feel like they just had a lot more cultural like significance,
Right.
and that's not really a thing that we see today where it's like everything is like, and I this is going back to bring it back to like your original point where I feel like we're like whether it's justified or not, the audience is being viewed as like really fucking stupid.
Hmm.
Or we're like in like terms of video games, it's like, oh, we gotta spell everything out for you now. Like we can't have games like the original Silent Hills where they don't really tell you anything, but they had like people have to figure out themselves.
Hmm.
Now horror games are generally like pretty linear.
And it's all
even
framed
like
around jump scares. It's all just like, okay, like what's the structure we can build where we can like work in
yeah,
these like
even
very
like
obvious scares.
yeah, even like Resident Evil 7, which I really like.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a difficult game like the puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I'm talking about movies where like we're regressing and like the audience is being treated as dumb, so we're being fed like explosions and like, oh, nice big scale CGI fests, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And like these art, I guess like these more, I don't want to say like intellectual because that sounds so douchey,
Mm-hmm.
but like these intellectual movies are not promoted as much, which shows in our box office, and it's not in the public like consciousness
Right.
of or like their awareness. And in the same vein, I guess my point was video games are also, I feel like, being dumbed down, and there's more, it's more being geared towards like the scale of things, how like, oh, like how epic was this like set piece, like do you see like how great these like graphics are, like how open this world is,
Mm-hmm.
versus like something like we played, I'm just bringing this because we played this like recently, like
Mm-hmm.
Silent Hill like 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't think those had, I'm gonna go ahead and say they didn't have really huge blockbuster budgets,
No, they were like
but they
shoestring
just
budgets.
they were so good at what it was trying to achieve.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like I don't, yeah, I guess like my main point, like you were saying, like Star Fox, you feel like, I guess like it kind of lets you learn and figure it out, which I don't really see today.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And I think that here I'm of two minds here where to go with this. Um, yeah, and I think that it's no, I yeah, and I think that sense of discovery is just unfortunately lost. Everything is now is like spread out and a lot thinner. Whereas like I would describe Star Fox Adventure and its contemporaries as being not quite as broad, but it has a lot more depth to it. And it's not like they have like insane. That's the other thing too. It's like there's also now a lot of superficial depth in video games, where it'll be like like a fucking every survival horror game now. It's like it's all the same thing. It's like sure like practically speaking, there's a lot of quote unquote depth there, but it's not really meaningful, And it's like like Star Fox Adventure didn't have any of that kind of any mechanics like that, but what was there felt significant, and like puzzles were organic. Like to my memory, this is this is a nostalgia brain, but to my memory, like the puzzles like had like some like a relatively organic feel to them, and like some ways like as like kind of like a precursor to some of the puzzles in games like Breath of the Wild, where it's like it organically makes sense within the game world, like what you're doing, like how to solve the puzzle, like what you would imagine, like, oh, well, I could just do this, and where in other games you're like, oh no, you have to put the block in the square hole or whatever. It's like, no, and that definitely did happen in Star Fox 2, but I mean that like there were some cases where it's like, oh no, you just gotta like use fire on this ice thing and it'll melt it, and like it feels it feels properly organic, and of course implemented in a way that made sense for the time period. I'm such a mic. But
No, I agree.
yeah, and
But that's also, we might also just be nostalgic assholes, so we might be wrong. But
oh no, absolutely. Like I need to go through and replay it, but thinking about Dinosaur Planet 64 and people talking about it, like going through and finishing it and getting like the full breadth of the original concept is like a really cool thing, and I think that's something that's like an awesome part of what we can do these days with them. We also touched on movies, and I think that that's a good jumping off point. I already mentioned. Let's talk about the scale of movies these days, and talking about how like you were talking about Woody Allen, and I wonder too how much though, like talking about like that scale of movie and like cultural significance. I wonder if there's some amount of failure to adapt in that. Like I remember what's it called? The one with Kristen Stewart and Jesse Eisenberg that he made. I saw that in theaters. Wheel of something or something like that.
Oh no, that's with Kirsten. That's with the woman from Titanic.
Oh, is it? I thought Kristen Stewart.
That.
I thought Kristen Stewart was in it. Hold on.
No. That's another movie you're thinking about. Those are two different movies. I know exactly what you're talking about because I watched them both in theaters, but they were both. Oh my god.
Here, I'm going to.
Oh, Cafe Society.
Cafe Society. Yeah, sorry. No, sorry. I said Wheel something. I know that's another movie of his. I haven't seen that. I've
It was that one
seen
was
a lot of
awful.
filmography. No, Cafe Society. Yeah, that was Woody Allen and Woody Allen, and then Jesse Eisenberg and Kristen Stewart, and it felt like I haven't even seen like a lot of his filmography, but it felt like a movie at a time. It felt like a movie made by someone who's like, oh, this is how I've always made movies, kind of thing. Like it's like similar kind of like philosophy behind it, similar kind of intentionality in its construction to his old movies, and just kind of like made with like the modern popular actors, and I don't know, it felt weird to me when I watched it, like I don't think it reviewed well, and it just kind of like, yeah, this feels like a movie out of time. Like I don't know, what are you doing? And so to me, like the filmmakers like Woody Allen, who kind of were doing like their own thing, and they were kind of like culturally significant. It's just taking a different form now, I think, and I think that it still occupies kind of like in our collective consciousness, I don't know, what I would guess would be a similar place. Like people like, and the thing is, right now it's being done a lot with horror, I feel like. So people like Ari Aster and Robert Eggers, is that his name, or is it Roger Eggers?
Roger Eggers.
Right, Roger Eggers. Or I feel like I get confused with Roger Ebert in there. But anyways, the guy who did The Lighthouse and The Witch, and Ari Aster, who obviously did Hereditary and Midsommar, and even people like Jordan Peele, doing things like Get Out and Us, like, and those are all horror movies. But I feel like it could be that could represent like a shift in, horror movies have always been a big part of like movie watching culture. So I think that maybe this is like the maintained part of it, but it now shifting into like appreciating it for its commentary in a way that maybe like the broader public didn't as much back in the day. Like you can go back to like, a lot of old horror movies and recognize that, like, yeah, there's a lot of like really interesting commentary and stuff here. Like obviously like The Thing was like a similar thing, like oh my god.
John Carpenter.
The John Carpenter, like all the John Carpenter horror movies, like there's interesting commentary there, but they weren't. I don't know. I'm gonna sound like a fucking like Gen Z asshole. I'm ceding this point because I'm just gonna sound fucking stupid. But to me, people like that, what I'm getting at is that like occupy a similar space now. And you got like the Noah Baumbach. Okay, Noah Baumbach is a more apt example, I guess. Noah Baumbach, I think, fills a similar role, and he has a distinct style, but it doesn't feel dated. I'm going to retreat back to that point. Noah Baumbach, I think, is like a more analogous director who's kind of like doing his thing at that scale, and it's kind of artsy, like your Wes Andersons and stuff. Like I think that's the modern evolution of these, and they're much more in touch with the current like consciousness around movie watching.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I just feel like Noah Baumbach, like a movie that like say like, I guess I can't use Marriage Story because that didn't come out in theaters. I feel like a lot of his movies, if he was making movies in like the 70s or 80s, like his movies came out then, I feel like he would be like a household name in the way that Woody Allen was back then.
Yeah.
But like I feel like, let's say like you ask someone who's like an average 20-year-old who wasn't into movies the way we are, I don't think they would necessarily know who the fuck Noah Baumbach is.
Wes Anderson, though. Everyone our age knows who Wes Anderson is. Maybe to a fault.
But I feel like that's because his visual style is super stylized too. Yeah. If he didn't have that visual stylization, I don't necessarily know how much people would know him.
It's true. Yeah. But it's like maybe an evolution. Like maybe there isn't going to be like a 1-to-1 analogy there. But I think that like, and also seeing that like Noah Baumbach has done like a lot of Marriage Story coming out on streaming and stuff. I don't know. Maybe that's how things are going to get done. I don't know. Who knows? We keep having pandemics like this. Maybe that's going to be how it has to be.
I hope so. He's adapting a book that I really like, actually.
Really? What's that?
It's called White Noise. It's kind of like I don't even know how to describe it because it's so like out there and unique. But yeah, we'll see how that turns out.
Oh, for sure. Well, speaking of streaming releases, we just both watched Minari. Was it last week? Yeah, last week, Thursday. And I think we both were pretty blown away by it. It's to me, it seemed to be kind of the I think it's might be my movie of the quarantine, therefore my movie of like the 2020/2021 award
Oh.
season. Kind of like it's up there for sure. Like I really liked. I'm thinking of ending things as well, but um, something about Minari really hit. It was kind of reminiscent to me of like The Farewell, which I also really liked. Of
Hmm.
just like really nailing representation of family and the connection, like intergenerational connection. I think is like really that connection is really powerful, and maybe it's just a theme that's particularly impactful to me. But the relationship between grandma and grandchild in both of those movies, in both Minari and The Farewell, just it hit like a train for me. And I think that just also the story really resonated to me. It's like, it is and it's the stupid thing about the Golden Globes, which we wanted to talk about, is that the idea of making it a foreign language film, which kind of like is implicitly the not American film category for all these awards. I mean, these awards are outdated. They're stupid. They really don't mean anything. But I still think the acknowledgement is significant. And the fact that they're going to say that like this is somehow not American is like, did you watch the movie? Like, if you have an actual realistic understanding of what being American is, this is the most fucking American story I can imagine.
Yeah.
And the themes of it and the power, it's like this is the embodiment of Americana. It should be.
Yeah. Yeah. Like yeah, I liked it a lot. I feel like it's kind of like, I don't know. Obviously, it's different from Parasite, but it was like a movie that, even though like Parasite was Korean, everyone could like resonate. It resonated with everyone. I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Um, except I feel like a neckbeard, but that's another discussion. Um, like, and like this, I don't think you have to be Korean to like. You could be like any minority
Yeah.
and kind of identify with like what happens in like the movie.
I think being a white American, you should be able to. Like, this
You
is like,
should,
if you understand the
but
ideals of America, like that's what this is. Also, just to be
yeah,
clear, this is an American produced, American made movie. This isn't like, like,
yeah,
Parasite was Korean produced and was brought over. I think it was justified that Parasite was nominated in primary categories that are normally reserved for quote unquote American movies too. This all American made by produced by A24, written and directed by an American film director, a Korean American film director, but he is from Korea. He's from America. Oh my god, I must have said from Korea. He's from America, like he was born here, or the story is his story. He immigrated here very young. He's a citizen. Like, it is ostensibly an American movie.
yeah,
So that's the really
and
insulting thing. So sorry, go ahead.
yeah. But like I was saying, like yeah, I feel like the movie, it's like significant because I feel for a long time, well, not a long time, but like for the past 20, like 30 years, Koreans like film has been like pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go ahead and say it's better than Japanese film, which might be a hot take.
I
Um,
I haven't watched as much Japanese film in recent years, but I will say that like me exploring it more and more, and it's still like kind of the biggest mainstream Korean directors. It's still been like a really insane, like the consistency
yeah,
is really impressive, and I've yet to be disappointed by the ones. I mean, obviously, I'm picking out like the ones that I know are supposed to be really good,
yeah,
but it's still just like it kind of blows me with how original and how technically proficient all these movies are. It's like it's better than the vast majority of American movies these days. It's insane.
yeah. I think it's like significant because I guess like Japanese media has always kind of like overshadowed like everything that's like Asian.
Mm-hmm.
So Japan was kind of like the standard when I was like growing up.
They definitely have the soft power for the longest time, and Korea is
Yeah,
starting to come up now, like
yeah,
to match it. But yeah, no, absolutely.
yeah. But yeah, back to my original point was like I was saying like I feel like Korean movies have been pretty established and well regarded for the past 20 years, but that's not really been a thing for like Asians in America.
There's a distinct interest, and like I'm from California. You'd think that we would have like a more progressive education system. We still learn about the missions like there's some sort of positive thing, and it's like
The what?
the missions, like as in so basically the missionaries who went all the way up the West Coast or the
Oh,
California
yeah.
coast, and so you have there's missions in Santa Barbara, and I think San Luis Obispo. Obviously, it didn't have much of an impact because I can't name all of them off the top of my head. There's one in Ventura, I think. Anyways, they're everywhere, but they were basically re-education camps for natives to try and like quote unquote civilize them. But we're kind of like we build little models of them, like, oh, this is the history of the missions here in California, and it's kind of gross when it comes down to it. It's an absolutely like colonial presence that comes down. And what I was getting back to there, the fact that fucking Watchmen on HBO had to teach a lot of people at Tulsa, and it's like them people talking about Tulsa because of Watchmen, because like I watched it late after it came out, and then we didn't fucking learn about that in school either. So it's a similar note of just like there's a distinct American political interest in educating us about some parts of history and not about others. And this isn't like a conspiracy theory kind of thing. These are the things that genuinely happen. Like I said, Tulsa, every Native American issue in American history, it's not emphasized in our education system. Yeah, there's a distinct interest in minimizing the success of minorities in general in the U.S. and their history overall. And I think Minari is really important too. And I think its acknowledgement or potential acknowledgement in awards is important because a lot of Asian immigration to the U.S. wasn't a concerted effort, directed effort by the U.S. government to send a certain message, And I think that this is important because it isn't in line with that narrative. It wasn't Isaac's story of his family wasn't one of, oh, my dad was a really rich doctor and we came here because he was like prioritized by the U.S. government to come and like be like an icon and be a model minority. And those people are still legitimate immigrants, obviously, and they're still very important, and I still think they have a lot of value to our country. But that's kind of like the image that most people have of Asian immigrants in their head. That's my impression, at least. And that wasn't what Isaac's family was. They were working class people. They were sexing chickens in California, and his father had the very classic American dream. He wanted to own land. He wanted to support himself and his family, and be successful and leave something for his children and give his children a better opportunity. And yeah, there's like a Korean like filter over that dream, but at its core, it's a kind of a universal thing that's it's not perfect, but it is, I think, like a relatively positive ideology that's kind of ingrained in us from children. In so much as like the weird habit of us saying the Pledge of Allegiance in school, like that is weird. That's like some weird patriotic shit.
But I've gotten scolded for not doing that.
Oh yeah, which is ridiculous. Yeah, it's insane. But like that is one portion of it that's like a really positive thing. And needs and should be acknowledged. Asian American contributions that should absolutely be acknowledged because America wouldn't be what it is without people like Isaac's family.
Yeah, I find it kind of. I feel like the movie foreshadowed the Golden Globes because like when they go to the church. Can we talk about spoilers?
I mean, and this is a pretty minor thing. I don't think it's critical to the story. I mean, they show significant stuff in the trailer, and I was worried about when I watched the trailer.
He's like the white kid goes up to him and he's like, like your face is like funny, which is like kind of to me.
Why is your face so flat?
Yeah, but like to like this English speaking kid, right? Mm-hmm. And then to me, that's like the Golden Globes being like, you're
foreign,
American produced, but you're not English language, so you're not gonna get the Best Picture nomination. Yeah. Meanwhile they gave like the same thing to Inglourious Bastards.
Exactly. That's the good point. Like Inglourious Bastards is only like 30% in English or something like that. Like, it's mostly in French or German or whatever else.
It takes place in Germany.
Yeah, and it's weird. There's not one scene that takes place in America. Curious. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's totally an arbitrary thing. And once again, with acknowledgement, the fact that I really hope this happens, that Steven Yeun gets nominated for Best Actor, but holy shit, how is it he would be the first Asian American person to be nominated for Best Actor? Like, we haven't come that far culturally. Like I think that we need to acknowledge that there has been progress, but oh my god, that this is where we're still not there. Like obviously awards aren't 1-to-1 cultural representations of our society, but
Yeah.
that is pretty insane that we're this far in. And it's also in stark contrast to, not that long ago, like 100 years ago, which isn't that long ago. That's like, only a couple generations. My mom loves going on Amazon Prime and watching like these super old movies where it's like Detective Chang investigates a murder or whatever, and it's just white dudes with
Oh,
like
with
pinned
like
back
the cape.
eyes
Yeah.
and speaking in a stereotypically Chinese accent.
Yeah.
And it's like the most offensive shit you can imagine, and she's tickled by it because it's so absurd in the modern day. But it's like that also wasn't that long ago. And then Steven Yeun might be the first Asian American person nominated for Best Actor. It's just like it's insane.
Yeah, that's like crazy to me.
And why couldn't Song Kang-ho been nominated for Best Actor? That's also the weird thing. It's like these weird barriers. Like what is it because he's not an American?
Yeah.
Like if Parasite can be nominated for Best Picture, best foreign language film. Did he get Best Screenplay nomination too? Was that one of them? Anyways,
Yeah, screenplay, yeah.
yeah,
You
or
know,
Best
I
Director.
never
Like
thought about that.
yeah,
I never thought about that. Like,
yeah.
I swear to God, I guarantee you there are like French actors who have been nominated for Best Actress, Actor.
Is that like an implicit
But
thing? I don't like. I haven't even thought about like. Is it only ever Americans who are nominated for those?
no, because like French actors and actresses have
Yeah.
been nominated for those.
Wait, oh, and definitely Brits. Sorry, no, of course not, because the Brits have been
No,
too.
British,
So
British,
yeah,
yeah.
so is it only white? Is it only like white or black American and UK people? Like it's weird that hasn't happened more, because yeah, I would have argued that basically the whole cast of Parasite should have been nominated for.
Oh, last year, Antonio Banderas.
Yeah, isn't Antonio Banderas? Isn't he American though?
Oh, is he American?
I don't know. He's at least a citizen. But yeah, no. But it's a what was it? What was he nominated for? What was he in last year?
Pain and Glory. I didn't watch that.
Oh, me neither. Okay. Anyway, yeah, it's a weird thing. Like that, there shouldn't be any. That shouldn't be controversial to have.
I love Joaquin Phoenix, but I'm not gonna say his performance is better than any of the Parasite ones.
Yeah. And that's one of those things too. It's like it's tough. It's like I love Rami Malek. I thought he did a great job. Him playing Freddie Mercury is probably the best part of Bohemian Rhapsody because that movie was a mess. But it's like there is something. This is kind of a thing with the Oscars, and I'm not original in thinking this. James of Funhouse pointed this out. It's like all you need to do to win best actor at the Oscars is to just like play a real life person. Is to like basically just do like an out there caricature. I mean, character like people who are extreme characters on their own right. Like that's and if you play them, it's kind of like a gimme when it comes to the Oscars. And
People eat that shit up.
yeah, and it's and it's the same way. Like Joker's obviously not, as much as he should be a real person, he's not. As much as he represents our society that we live in, he's not a real person. But because he's like kind of like an extreme caricature, there's nothing to compare it to. There's no, I mean, like people would compare it to Heath Ledger's Joker, but I mean, it's like, there's no real world figure that we can look back and be like, look how good that was. It's not like Daniel Kaluuya in Judas and the Black Messiah, where you're like, holy shit, he nailed Chairman Fred Hampton. Like it is uncanny how close he got in terms of depiction. Like, and I think it would be justifiable to nominate him for like a Best Acting award, but it is something you said like, yeah, if you're playing an original character with no other reference to compare him to, it doesn't have the same impact as if it's like, oh, this is that person, and like they're doing a good job imitating them. And it's like, I don't know, should the Best Actor award be only based around like being able to impersonate a person very effectively,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's usually like a real life person, and then there has to be scenes where there's very outward like emotion, which isn't a bad thing. I'm not bashing that. Like huge displays of like anger or like sadness in a movie, but it's a lot easier to show like these like fucking actor yelling in anger than it is to show like a really subtle sadness, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would say another example of that is Eddie Redmayne in The Danish Girl, and like
Oh yeah,
it's significant.
not
It's
to
like
take away from him, not to take away
he's
from
a good
like him
actor,
as
except
an
in Jupiter
actor.
Ascending. Like
Yeah.
he's and it's an important story. There's a lot of trans. I've seen a lot of trans people be critical of it for its depiction of like the trans experience. I can't speak to it, but I do know that it's like considered broadly an imperfect representation of a trans person's life. But it's the kind of thing of just like or Jared Leto in Dallas Buyers Club. Who isn't trans. Kind of playing that experience and it getting acknowledged just kind of by default. And it seems like it might be kind of like a knee-jerk reaction, as it's kind of like a shortcut for them to say like, oh look, we're acknowledging this, when it comes to like something like trans issues, which seems to like you see it with Dallas Buyers Club and Danish Girl, where it's like, oh no, see, we're acknowledging this thing, we're acknowledging this, we don't have to be introspective at all. We're giving this person, this cis person, credit for playing a trans person. We're acknowledging it, and it requires no further examination of like their history or the quality of the representation, or addressing anything like that. I don't know. It's weird how this stuff kind of like the angle that gets taken with it, and I do think that there is like, it's weird Hollywood politics. And I don't mean politics in like, kind of a boogeyman kind of way. I just mean it in that like, you can definitely kind of see the underlying, like they're trying to read the room with it basically. And we were both pretty sure that like Parasite wasn't going to win last year.
It's the only time I'll ever give the Academy props.
And the thing is, because we were so confident that they're like so disconnected. And
okay, 2 times actually. First time being when Moonlight beat La La Land.
Oh yeah,
But,
absolutely.
yeah.
But I think both of those, I think it could just. I think both those movies absolutely deserve the recognition that they got. But I still, a decent part of me believes that that was a cynical pick on the part of these award groups, like not just the Oscars with the Academy, of like any of these groups. Like I suspect that there's a cynical aspect to it, of them being like, oh yeah, like we're getting called out a lot for like only nominating white people and stuff. Like we need to show that we're like accepting of others. And my philosophy tends to be like, okay, if these things are going to be acknowledged through them just wanting to be like cynical about it, that's fine. Like fuck them, because they're behind, and if they don't see the true genuine value of it, and they wouldn't nominate these independent of their cultural significance, then fuck them. But I'm like, okay, cool. Like, we're getting there, and it's getting acknowledged. Even if it's through cynical means, I'm glad they're getting acknowledgement, and I'll take it. And that in and of itself might have an effect of shifting the culture around it and society around it to then reframe things and say like, yeah, we're gonna accept these more and more too. I think Roma probably did a lot of work towards that too.
I didn't watch that actually.
I haven't either, but I just mean, so I can't speak definitively about it, but I mean just like, it getting acknowledgement, I think could contribute significantly towards that like cultural shift as well. And like I said, I think it's hard for me to imagine anything but a cynical motivation for that from them. But you know what? That's fine. I think that like
we'll get there.
Yeah, and like eventually
maybe not in our lifetime.
Yeah, eventually it won't be cynical. We're maybe. But I think what it means, I think that like it does more good than whatever bad it gets from their self-satisfaction of being like, haha, see, we really got them that time. It's like, okay, sure, yeah, dude. Like if you want to feel that way, I still think that it does like a lot more cultural positive change than there is any drawback to them thinking they pulled one over on us. We're getting kind of long in the tooth here with this, but I think just like, before we go, since we're talking about Korean movies, how I felt about Peninsula, because we finally got around to watching that. So let's give our short thoughts on Peninsula before we go.
We give our rating first. So we give our rating first.
Okay, you go.
Let's see. I gave it a.
Oh yeah, let me check. Did I rate this on Letterboxd? Because I
gave it a 3 out of 10.
3 out of 10. Okay, let's see what it.
5 being average.
I don't think I rated this on Letterboxd actually. I should have. I have not yet, but I would probably have to. I would probably give it a 1.5 or 2 out of 5. I think there's some cool ideas in it, but oh my god,
Yeah.
comparing it to Train to Busan, it's like, how did we get here? It really just feels like another idea they had for a zombie movie, and they were like, oh, it'll be convenient for us to like attach the name of Train to Busan to it,
You
because
know,
that was successful.
I'm curious, and this is kind of related to what we were talking about before. Um, I'm curious how much they wanted to appeal to like an international audience with this.
It feels like a Fast and Furious movie in more ways than one. Like it feels
It
like a modern Fast and the Furious movie in a lot of ways.
it didn't have any of the like the thing about the first one was like they had characters that like you cared about,
Mm-hmm.
which is like a very like generic statement, but it's just like the truth.
Hold on one sec.
Yeah.
No, yeah, just talk about.
Yeah, that's like a very generic like praise of a movie, but I mean it's the truth. Like I feel like no, this is like kind of similar to what I was saying before. Like they took like this relatively like small scale movie that is like pretty compact. It mostly takes place in a fucking train,
Mm-hmm.
and it worked really well in like cramped spaces. Like I don't think the budget was like gigantic.
They probably had a lot more
Yeah.
money for Peninsula than they did in Train to Busan.
Yeah, so it's like how do we make this like bigger with like more room and boom and like pew pew like guns.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just took away everything that made the first movie good.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
why like you go through the first movie seeing like this kind of a dickhead dad who's like kind of like absent
Mm-hmm.
daughter, and then you like sympathize with him, and when he gets offed at the end, it's like really upsetting.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the impression that they were trying to do something similar at the end of Peninsula, but it's like, why do I care about these characters? Like I
Exactly.
don't. They were trying to do it at the beginning with like this guy's family like dying,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, you can't make me care about someone's family dying when I've seen them on the screen for a minute.
Yeah,
Like
and
that's not how this works.
it's like that expectation of like, oh, like you care about this guy dying, and it's like no, and then it's like, oh, but he has a family, and then it's like, oh no. It's yeah, no, it's pretty astounding how they managed to do so little character work and development throughout Peninsula when they did such a good job in a shorter time frame. I'm pretty sure with Train to Busan, to more effectively get you to connect with these characters. It's and then the CG was awful in Peninsula. There were a lot less like great ideas per minute. Like Train to Busan was really cool because it had a lot of really interesting ways to use zombies that hadn't been done before in a lot of other movies. And then there's like maybe like 3 in Peninsula. The only one I can really think about is like how they were packed into that like stairwell in that, and then there was like the they seeded it in the very beginning, and then it paid off at the end in Peninsula. Besides that, like there wasn't a ton of like really creative use of zombies. There's like kind of cool stuff like using flares and stuff, but it doesn't feel like they established the rules around zombies enough to like really make that like feel oh yeah, these are like like the ingenuity of the characters in the world are at play here. It just kind of feels like arbitrary. It's just like, oh, they have
Yeah.
flares that distract the zombies.
Like at the same time, like the first one too, right? Like there were no guns,
Yeah,
so
they have to
it's just like
problem solve.
a huge departure from like what like an American audience is like used to in zombie movies.
It's
But
like a
like
default in America that like if there's a zombie apocalypse in America, people are gonna have guns.
yeah, like The Walking Dead, like you
Yeah.
shoot the zombies and then like everyone has guns, but like it's interesting in Train to Busan that there's no guns.
In Asia, that's not the case. Like if you're doing like a
Yeah.
realistic take on a zombie apocalypse, that's also, for the record, we might come back to this at some point in the future. The manga I Am a Hero is really interesting for that because it's a zombie apocalypse with some other aspects to it, but no one
Yeah.
really has guns in Japan, and so guns are a very hot commodity. It's significant that the main character has one because he has like a legal sporting license, and that's just super rare. And so yeah, it introduces in a really interesting perspective for a really tired and overplayed genre like zombies. And yeah, even that core thing that like seems to make Train to Busan really interesting. Like, there's no reason to fucking go hand to hand punching combat with zombies in Peninsula because everyone has a gun. But that was a really awesome part of Train to Busan. Also, really fun part of Resident Evil 7's DLC. So yeah, it's a real shame. They could have done something interesting. I mean, who knows? I think the brand is still powerful enough. Maybe they'll try and like redeem themselves and make another more grounded. Like in this thing, Train to Busan wasn't that grounded. Like it was like there was a lot of absurdity in it, but like it's grounded enough and like very vulnerable and human, although not like super complicated characters. You still connected with them. All that felt grounded and small scale enough that like you didn't go okay then. It wasn't like world. It's like Train to Busan kind of felt like what World War Z should have been. With like the scale of zombies, like the style of zombies, and it actually made you care. And like the way it's kind of like an odyssey. So yeah, it's just sad. Hopefully they'll maybe try and do something better next time. But that might be a good. This may be a good place to leave off with a little bit of disappointment. But we had a lot more stuff to talk about that we didn't get to today. We'll happily, I'm sure, get into just as much depth about next time. But anyways, thank you guys all for listening, whoever is listening. This was a lot of fun. Please be patient with us too. This is something that we're new to, and we're gonna work out the kinks on if there's any shortcomings there. And but yeah, we'll hope you stick around for future episodes.